Hello everybody and welcome to my PC building video. Now my old PC is going on about 6 years old right now and it's still kicking, don't get me wrong, but I could use a little more power. And since all the technology has changed since then, there's new processors, there's new RAM, there's solid state drives are the standard, I might as well just build a whole new system instead of trying to continue to upgrade my old one. So here we are. Now there's a few things I'd like to note first. One is that I have no idea what the audio for this is going to sound like. I'm using a brand new lavalier microphone that I have no idea how it's going to sound. It might sound absolutely terrible, in which case I'm going to be using the camera audio, but camera audio is not going to be as good because it's capturing the sound of the entire room. So we'll see. Anyway, I apologize for that. I'm also going to be naming off a lot of products in this video. I'm not sponsored by any of them. I bought whatever was basically the cheapest and fit my needs. They might all be terrible. For all I know, this computer is going to blow up in a week. So don't take my word on any of these. Do your own research and things like that. Not sponsored. Don't get mad at me if things go wrong. Now, all that being said, let's start off with the case, shall we? Ta-da! So what I have here is the Cooler Master Silencio S600. One of my main goals when I'm building this new PC is that I want it to be quiet. And this is one of the quieter cases out there for the price, at least as far as I can tell. There's also a version of this that comes with the glass side panel. I did not get that because it was more expensive. And also I didn't think I would have anything to look at on the inside, but I'll get back to that later. So this case does a couple things to help it be quieter. For one, almost every single one of these panels, top, sides, even the front, has foam padding on it, which helps deaden the sound, but also a lot of the sound escaping from a case is through the vents, so there's not really any exposed vents. There's one on the back side here. That one's exposed. But in the front here, what they've done is they've covered it up with this nice little magnetic door, which is really cool. But it can still get air in by sucking it in through this side front panel here. So that's really cool. I like that. Okay, so I've removed the side panel so we can see inside, and we can see it is very nice and clean in here. And it's got a couple of fans, one in the back, one in the front. That's pretty standard. What's not as standard is that these are the variable speed 4-pin fans. So they will run at slow speeds when you're under low loads, and they'll run at high speeds when you're under high loads. But that helps you keep the case as quiet as possible depending on your load. There's a shield down here. This underneath here is where the power supply and the hard drives go. Of course, we've got our motherboard mounting. It came with, I don't know if you can see, it came with these, focus. Anyway, it came with these little mounting, all right, you know what, it's gonna be out of focus. But it came with these pre-installed, which was nice. And I've already gone through and sort of made sure that they're tight. So that's all good. That's really nice. On the back side here, we can see there's a lot going on. We've got a huge bundle of cords here for all the stuff on top, as well as the fan is this cord right here. It's got a nice extension cord that runs all the way down here to this. This was a little confusing to figure out because, so this is the part that actually plugs into the motherboard, and that's got the 4 pins, and that comes all the way up to this. And this has the 4 pins, so that's all good with the fan, but it also has these splitters here in case you want to put more fans on, but these are only 3-pin, so don't be fooled. They've all got it neatly bundled together here and actually attached to the case, but that's not going to matter because I'm going to have to pull that all off to get in there anyway. We got all our spare parts in here. We'll just set those aside for now. And down in here is where our power supply is going to go. So that's actually the first thing I'm going to do. I just want to get that in there and get it out of the way so I don't have to worry about it anymore. So I'm going to set up for that. This is the power supply I picked out. It's a EVGA 750 GT SuperNova, and it met all the requirements I was looking for. For one, I wanted it to be fully modular. I wanted it to be quiet, and this one has an eco mode, so it shuts the fan off completely when it's at low loads, so that fits that thing. I wanted it to be, well, at least 80 plus bronze, but the 80 plus gold is actually like icing on the cake for me. And I was originally going to get its predecessor because it was cheaper, but then somebody in California was selling this for cheaper than that. So that's what I went with. And it's actually over here. I was gonna go ahead and put it straight in the case, but I realized that there's not a ton of room to put that in the case and then put the cords on. Let me see if I can sort of demonstrate. If I was to put that down in there, there's not a whole lot of room between the hard drive case there, and these cords are all in the way, but you see what I'm trying to say. I don't want to try and plug the modular cords in with this already installed. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm gonna get those all set up and then I'm gonna install it. There's gonna be a whole bunch of cords hanging out the side, but whatever, we'll deal with it. All right, so this is actually turning into a little bit of a pain in the butt because all these cords are so stiff. They don't really want to bend and go in there. They're gonna have to. They don't have much of a choice. Just ease on in there. This is one of these times when the shield that's in here is actually a bit of a pain in the butt, because if that wasn't there, I could just drop it in. All right, well, she's technically in. That's just gonna have to do. These are really bent, but that's just because they're stiff. They're not gonna break or nothing. All right, now where are the screws for this? I read all the instructions like way before I started doing this video, but I don't remember a word of them. Of course, that's probably because there aren't any words. It's basically just pictures. All right, I think I need the tiny screws out of this package. Oh, it's gonna be one of those packages. Well, now I just dumped everything out and I didn't want to do that. 1 screw, 2 screws, 3 screws, and nope, that's not what I want. 4 screws. All right, we got those. I need a bowl or something. Little fish bowl. All right, just scoop these ever so gently, itsy bitsy teeny bit at a time into the bowl. Excellent. I don't know if these screws are big enough, but they're all I got. Here we go. 1 screw at a time. This one's not screwing in. Well, now I'm basically out of frame of the camera, but this is the only place I can sit and be comfortable and still get this done, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. All right, we got 2 screws in, we're on a roll. Let's get this 3rd one in and we should be sitting pretty. That one also doesn't wanna go in. They gave me the world's shortest screw to try and screw this in with, so that's a point against you, Cooler Master. Give me bigger screws next time. There we go, that's catching. All right, so that's 3 in. And that's 4 in. All right, so I just gotta tighten this up and then we can move on. All right, so this is the motherboard I decided to get. It is an Asus Prime Z590P. And it was the cheapest thing that did everything I wanted it to do. I also consider Asus to be a trustworthy brand, and it comes with AuraSync. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it has something to do with wanting to do like LED strips or something like that, which I don't have. However, the same symbol is on the cooler that I got. So maybe I could do something with that. We'll see. I don't know. All right, there she is, all ready to go. We've got an LGA 1200 slot for the processor. We've got 4 slots of DDR4 RAM. We have the Z590 chipset, which is ready for the 11th gen processors, which is good because that's what I got. We have PCI Express 4 for the graphics card. I don't need it, but it's nice to have for in the future. And we've got PCI Express 4 for a solid state drive, which I also don't need, but it's good to have. I do need the slot though. This is going to be my first time doing an M.2 solid state drive, which I'm excited about, so that's going to be fun. It's also got this, oops, excuse me, there we go, for the I/O panel. It doesn't have nearly as many USB slots as I would like, but nothing does, so that's going to have to work. Everything here is pretty self-explanatory though. First things first, we're gonna put in the 11th generation Intel i7 11700K processor, which is what I got. I could do a whole video as to whether or not the 11th generation is worth it, especially compared to say the 10th generation, but I'm not gonna do that. What matters is this is 11th generation, and what is currently in that PC down there is 4th generation. So even if this isn't worth it compared to the 10th generation, it is definitely worth it compared to the 4th generation. So that's why I went with this one.
Hey, it's me, in voiceover form. I realized that what I said there might have been a little confusing and frankly not made any sense, so let me try and explain it very briefly. What I was trying to say is that it doesn't matter whether I got the 10th generation or the 11th generation, because for my purposes, they both greatly outperform the processor I currently have, which is 4th generation. All right. Back to the video.
I also went with the i7 because it's virtually the same as the i9 for $200 cheaper, so that just kind of made sense. But either way, I am upgrading from a 4-core 4-thread processor to a 8-core 16-thread processor. And while it's not going to be the world's biggest boost when it comes to gaming, because that 4-core processor does perfectly well at that, especially because I have it overclocked, it's going to help me a ton with things like streaming and video editing. It's going to give me a lot of extra cores to use, a lot of overhead. And how do I get this open? A lot of overhead so that it doesn't like get bogged down when I'm streaming, things like that. I like things that run fast, you know? And there she is. It's hard to see with the glare. It's also not going to focus, but whatever. There's the actual processor. If you watched my unboxing video, then you've already seen this. If you haven't watched my unboxing video, then go watch it. Now, like I said, I already read the instructions on how to do this, but I just want to be safe. Okay, yeah, so it's basically like every other processor. Open the thing up, drop it in, close it up. Bada bing, bada boom. Here we go. All right, that's up. This is open. There we go. And then we get our processor out. We have to line up the arrow. Where's the arrow? There's a dot over here in the corner. You can't see it, but there's a dot in one of the corners. I'm assuming that's where I'm supposed to line up the little arrow. Oh, it's also got little notches on it, so there's only one way this can actually drop in here. And she's in. All right, we'll go ahead and close her up. It's giving me some resistance. I don't like that. Is everything okay in here? It's in. It's just a little bit of resistance sliding this back into place, I guess. Hold on, let me consult this again. I don't want to completely wreck my really expensive computer just trying to build the darn thing. All right, well, this basically is unhelpful, and it says Asus will not cover damages resulting from incorrect CPU installation/removal, incorrect CPU orientation placement, or other damages resulting from negligence by the user. So Asus is absolutely no help in this situation. Okay, so it sounds like one of those things where it takes more force than you would think it takes, but as long as it's installed correctly, you're not going to hurt anything. So here we go. Come on, close in there. There we go. All right, we should be good, right? Yeah, we good. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna put in is the RAM. This is a G.Skill 32 gigabyte DDR4 module. Funnily enough, it's packaged backwards, which is on purpose because that's where all the barcode and all the information is, but it's funny because this is not what I'd wanna see on the shelf. That's what the front looks like. The front is much prettier to look at. But so, like most things, this was the cheapest, reliable thing that fits my needs. So nothing super special going on here, just cheap, fit my needs. All right, so obviously over here is where all the RAM goes. There's 4 slots and they are labeled in that order, A1, A2, B1, and B2. Now, I understand that all of this needs to be set up the way it is because of the way that like dual channel memory and things like that work. The thing that I don't understand is why if you're only putting in one module, which is all I'm doing, so I've just got the one. If you're only going to put in one module, you don't put it in A1, which would be the logical place to put it. You put it in A2. That's according to the instructions. See, if there's only one, you put it in A2, and if there's 2 of them, you put it in A2 and B2. See, again, that makes sense, because the A is one channel, B is the other channel, and you want to evenly distribute across the channels, so you're going to get the best performance that way. What I don't understand is why it's A2 and B2 and not A1 and B1, but whatever. We're going to go ahead and put this in. All right, so to put this in, we go ahead and flip this latch down, and then we just take this and gently put it in. If I could get it in straight, there we go. All right, and then presumably this will click once it's actually in. So here's another little problem I've run into is I've got this out on this board so I can work on it without the case being in the way, because trying to get down in the case gets kind of difficult, and plus you guys can't see it on camera if I've got the case laid out here and the motherboard's down inside and all that good stuff. Problem is, this slides around a lot. So I'm trying to put even force on here so it latches in straight without the motherboard sliding out from underneath. And it's giving me a ton of resistance, which I don't care for. Oop, that's one side. And then another side. Beautiful. All right. She's in. So last thing we need to put in is our solid state drive, which is a M.2, lays flat on the motherboard type thing, which means I need to get this heat shield off. So I'm gonna do that first. All right, so here it is with the heat shield taken off, and over here I've got the solid state drive, so that's going to lay flat in there. It's pretty, I got it backwards actually, but it's gonna basically take up the full length, but that's gonna be really awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that in. So I don't know how easy this is to see on camera, but I've got it in the slot here, and it's floating above this. Hold on, let me come around this way. it's floating above this little screw plate here that it's supposed to be, you know, hooked into. You guys see it's floating there. So I'm guessing that's what these are for, but we'll see. I'm gonna play around with it. Yeah, that's much better because now this actually rests on that. So yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. It's not clear from the instructions, but I deduced it because I'm smart. All right, so I've got that in and snugged down. That is the world's tiniest screw. So that was a pain in the butt, but that's in, which means now I just need to put this bad boy back on. And it actually says that I'm supposed to peel this plastic off because this is technically a heat sink to help spread the heat out. And of course, you know, it's not gonna focus, but anyway, so I think you're supposed to peel that off and it's probably very lightly sticky and it'll stick to the top of this. And yeah, I'm just gonna do it. I'll be back in a second. All right, and just like that, the heat sink / cover is back on, and we had little to no issues with that, so that's good. But I believe that's the last thing I can install on the motherboard without it being in the case. So now it's time for the fun part of trying to mount this in the case. So the downside to having all the cords in the case already is now they're just sort of dangling down here like some sort of weird alien thing. So I'm not super happy about that, but there's not really a way around it. But before we can even put the motherboard in, this is the IO panel cover. And I almost started putting the motherboard in before putting this in, which would have been a problem. Shut up, case. That would have been a problem because you can't fit this between the motherboard and the case once the motherboard is in, especially because the motherboard has a fancy IO panel guard on it. So I'm gonna put this in first and then I'm gonna put the motherboard in. Come on, buddy, you know you wanna go in there. Just need some gentle force to clip it in. There we go, that should hold it in place. Lovely. All right, so I need 9 more of our little screw friends here to actually screw in the motherboard. These are the same ones that they want you to use for the PSU, and there's exactly 9 of them left after using 4 of them on the PSU, so no extras there, so definitely don't want to lose these. But these actually make sense. Screws this size make sense to put in a motherboard. They didn't make sense to put in the PSU. They're like barely threaded into the PSU once it gets through. You know what, forget it. I'm just gonna complain about it the whole time. I'm now realizing there's not a good way to hold the motherboard while dropping it in here because it's very snug on all the sides. My fingers won't fit. I've also just noticed something. So down here in the corner, I don't know if I can get it to focus. You can kind of see, it's not focused, but you can see, so there's the white thing there with like 4 pins sticking out of it. One of the pins is bent. Now I think that is an RGB header. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for me. But that's kind of disappointing, so we'll see. All right, we're basically just very gently dropping this in the case because there's no better way to do it. The feet are already in. Just ever so carefully plop her down. Close enough. You can't see it, but it's close enough. Again, the bottom panel on this case is actually making it really difficult to maneuver anything in here. It's overall probably a nice thing to have, especially when it comes to like canceling out noise and separating the hard drives from the rest of the case and things like that, but it's actually just sort of hindering my ability to put cords and components and things like that where they go. But if I'm lucky, I only have to do this once, so I'll suffer through. I'm actually also realizing that there's only 6 screws to mount this in place instead of 9 like I originally thought. I don't know if you can see, these little black circles here are where the screws go, and there's only 6 on there. So I technically have 3 extra screws, which is not what I was expecting, but I'll take it. All right, I got one of the corners in place, so I'm gonna start threading that screw in so I don't lose that spot, and then I'll try and line up all the other ones. I'm not gonna put it in tight, just gonna get it in enough to actually keep it in its place. And in general, you don't wanna over-tighten screws on a motherboard anyway, because you could bend the motherboard, damage it, things like that. It just needs to be barely snug. It's not going anywhere. In worst case scenario, you can go in and re-snug all the screws if you have to. Play it safe. All right, now I got 2 screws in, so that'll help keep it in place. Just 4 more to go. Last time I did a full PC build, I had my friend helping me, and that was actually a good idea because then when one person can hold the components in place while the other person puts the screws in. But you should go check him out on Twitch, and Antoine670, I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, he's a really fun Twitch streamer. He does a lot of chill stuff, a lot of Minecraft, things like that. So you should definitely go check him out. He's a good guy. And screw it, if I'm shouting out people on Twitch, you should check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/BasiliskFang. I'm doing all sorts of fun stuff over there. Ultra Nightmare Run of Doom, that's always fun. All right, well, she's in there without too much of a struggle. There is one little thing. So besides this pin, maybe I can get a better view of it here, but you can see that pin on the right is bent. So I'm not happy about that. But also, if I come over here and look at this IO panel, at this end, we're doing okay. Everything sort of, you know, lines up correctly. But you come down here and those aren't quite lined up. And there's nothing I can really do about that. If I, you know, press down on the motherboard from the inside, I can kind of get them to line up, but that's where the panel's positioned. That's got nothing to do with the motherboard being screwed in or anything like that. The way the panel's actually situated on the motherboard has caused that to happen. So that's gonna be a little bit of a hassle, hopefully not too much trouble. You know, worst case scenario, I might file away bits of this IO panel or something like that, but so that's not great. You know, Asus, who did the motherboard, and I don't know, I'm not super impressed. I mean, if it works, then great, but I don't know. Anyway, so next thing is we need a cooler, and I have over here my super duper awesome RGB LED. Hold on, I gotta put the phone on. Anyway, I've got this 240 millimeter light up cooler, water cooler thing. Water coolers are generally quieter than air coolers. That's part of why I went with that. And also, this case is quiet generally at the cost of cooling. It doesn't cool quite as well as, say, my current case, which is down here. It's super dusty. That's also a Cooler Master, but that's more a conventional case, and it cools really awesome because all those panels are exposed, and the front panel on this is not exposed, which is the whole point, and it can't get air in quite as good. So to compensate, really big water cooler, just to make sure everything's good, and the LEDs were just kind of a bonus. This was the cheapest, best quality thing that met my needs, and it just so happened to be light up. So we're gonna go with it. But, so here's the thing. I wanna put that 240 millimeter panel, the radiator, on the front of the case here, and it's going to start down here at the bottom of the case, down in this divot, and it's gonna come up to here, which means that this fan is in the way. So this fan has to come out, and we're gonna move it. Well, we're either going to remove it or move it. I haven't quite decided yet. I have the option of taking this drive bay out here and moving the fan up to the top here for a little extra cooling. But if I'm going to do that, I probably won't do that now. I'll do that at a later date if I do it at all. So for now, I think I'm just gonna remove this fan and then put the cooler in. So let's get started on that. All right, so I got the fan out. That was pretty easy, but now I gotta try and get the cooler in here, which is gonna be a bit of a pain in the butt because it's gonna be bulky. It's an all-in-one system, so I can't do it in pieces, and I have to fit it down in a slot down here. You can't see it, but because there's this bottom panel on the thing, I have to actually slide it down in here a little bit. But anyway, I'm gonna go work on that, and hopefully it won't be as difficult as I think it's going to be. There's a lot of gear in this bag, and I have no idea what it does, so this is going to be a long process.
2 hours later.
All right, as you can see, the cooler is in there. I've got the pump over here already rigged up to go. Basically, the last stage of installation is actually putting the thermal paste on the processor and actually setting the pump in place. You know, other than I've got loose wires here, but that's gonna be a very final process. But there is thermal paste that came with the cooler, which is nice because not a lot of coolers come with the thermal paste. I mean, some of them come with it already on the pump, and I need to remove that plastic, but some of them will already come on the pump. This one didn't. It did come with its own tube, and I've heard that the Cooler Master thermal paste is really good, but I actually have some Arctic Silver 5 left over from the last time I did a water cooler, so I'm gonna use that instead. There's lots of different philosophies on how to put on thermal paste. Some people will say just do a little dot in the center the size of a pea. Some will say size of a grain of rice. Some will say a line, 2 lines, an X, whatever. It turns out as long as you're doing it correctly, it doesn't really matter the shape. You're gonna, shave off maybe 1 degree Celsius, which is not a big deal. So I opted for the grain of rice philosophy here, which turned out really messy, but it's gonna be okay. And less is more, so this should work. All right, so now I'm gonna start the delicate procedure of actually putting the cooler on. And all right, there she is, just as snug as a bug in a rug without any noticeable leakage of thermal paste or anything like that coming off the sides, which means we are good to go. Now, we are actually running out of components to put in here. In fact, I think the last thing we need to put in is the graphics card, which is going to go in this top slot here. Now, the graphics card is basically the one thing on this computer I didn't buy new. This is coming out of my old computer. This is a 2070 Super. So it's a fairly modern card. There's no really need to buy a new card. So I'm just gonna install this one, which means that computer down there, that dusty boy, is going to be limping for a while because it's not gonna have a graphics card in it. But if everything goes well, it's not gonna matter. So I'm gonna go ahead and install this. And there she is. She's in there without too much trouble. Slight misalignment on the screws and stuff back here, but nothing, no big deal. That was just a slight annoyance, not actually a problem. So I believe there's only one thing left to do, and that's to wire everything up. And that's gonna take a while. So I will be right back. Well, there she is, all wired up. That is so far my best cable management job. Not that it's perfect. There's a whole lot of cable going on over here. That's not very avoidable. A couple of CPU cables up there sticking around. You know, don't pay attention to that. And especially don't pay attention to what's going on in the back here. Thankfully, that's going to be all covered up. So that's not going to be a big deal. And also, thankfully, there's actually quite a bit of room back here for cable management. Like I can fit, see if I can get a good camera angle here. I can fit my whole thumb between the back plate for the motherboard and, I mean, not my whole thumb, but most of my thumb between the back plate for the motherboard and the back side of the case. So that leaves tons of room to shove all this in and nobody will ever see it. So anyway, there's nothing left to do at this point except for plug it in and hope to God that it boots to the BIOS. So here's hoping. All right, here we are. Moment of truth time. I need to actually get back here and turn the switch on. So, see if there's gonna be any flames or smoke or anything. Well, my light's all flash, but that doesn't mean anything. Let's boot her up. So far, no flames. That's always a good sign. Not seeing anything on the ooh, we have activity on the monitor. Sweet. Let's see, Asus Prime, blah, 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 blah. Speed 3600 megahertz, total memory 32 gigs. That's all showing up. One drive, 3 keyboards, 1 mouse, 1 hub, detected devices, M.2. New CPU installed. Please enter setup to configure your system. Press F1 to continue and take advantage of Asus optimized performance. If you wish to follow Intel guidelines and apply its stock power limits, please disable the Asus multi-core enhancement in the BIOS settings. Next, you will enter the UEFI settings menu. How? Well, before we mess with that, let's just come down here and check the case out. So, first things first, everything is very quiet. You're gonna have to pardon all the stuff in the way. This is just where it lives. All the stuff is in the way. That's just the way it's gonna be. But, so for starters, I like that the RGB is working. That's pretty cool. I don't know if you can see it through the crack really. We'll find out later, but that's nice. That's a cool feature. It's very quiet. It is super quiet. It is way quieter than my other computer. And all the fans are running. Those fans are running. That fan's running. The pump's running. Everything seems good here. GPU is running. Everything's running. I'm happy about that. That's a good start. So let me go figure out these BIOS settings. Hey, here we are. All right, well. How we do? Ooh, motherboard temperature 24 degrees Celsius, CPU temperature 26 degrees Celsius. All right, we're sitting pretty good here. Let me mess with this. I can already tell, so the memory's wrong. That's supposed to be, what, 66 megahertz, so I have to do that. And I need to do some looking into making sure that the, turbo boost stuff works for the CPU, but I will do that in a second. All right, see you guys in a bit. All right, well, I have a ton of tweaking and setup and all things like that still to do, but it's working. So I'm gonna count that as a win, and it's about 3 a.m. So I'm ready to also call it quits for the night, and I'll work on this more tomorrow. But thank you everybody so much for watching. I certainly appreciate it. At the very end here, I'm gonna, just for fun, put a sheet in that says what my old specs were and what the new specs are, and you can sort of check those out and compare. And I'll also have links to other videos that you can go and watch, which I would certainly appreciate. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff from me. Leave a like on this video if you liked this video, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye!
Hi, it's me in voiceover form again. It's actually taken me about 6 weeks to get around to editing this video, and in that time I've formed some thoughts about this new PC. So let me walk you through this card. First things first, let's talk about the case. The old PC had a Cooler Master HAF 912, and this new PC has a Cooler Master Silencio S600. The HAF 912 has a lot of ventilation, and the pre-installed fans run at full speed all the time. Because of this, the case stays very cool even under harsh conditions, but it does so noisily. There's no annoying rattling or squeaking, but the rushing air does make a lot of sound. The Silencio S600, on the other hand, has variable speed fans that are very quiet when the PC is idling. Combine that with insulated side panels and few vents, and it's a very quiet case. That does mean that the case gets much warmer than the HAF 912, and I had to make a custom fan profile because my GPU was dumping all of its heat into the case, but the fans are based on CPU temperatures, so that warm air wasn't going away fast enough. The Silencio S600 has better cable management, but it's not perfect. Personally, I could use a wider gap between the back panel and the inside panel that the motherboard is mounted on. Speaking of motherboards, the old PC had an MSI Z97S SLI Crate Edition board, while this new PC has an Asus Prime Z590P. Both boards are similar, most of the differences are due to updates in technology. The Asus feels slightly more user-friendly, but the MSI board had an awesome serpent logo on the board and boot screen, so you win some, you lose some, I guess. The CPU is the main reason I wanted to build a new computer. The old machine had an Intel i5-4690K, and the new machine has an Intel i7-11700K. Besides the general technology updates, the new CPU has twice the cores and 4 times more threads than the old one. That has made a noticeable difference in the speed of multi-threaded programs such as video muxing and rendering. It also allows me to have many programs and internet tabs open at once without any noticeable dips in performance. The new CPU speeds are much better too. The 11700K comes with a 5.0 GHz boost clock right out of the box, whereas I had to overclock the old one to squeeze 4.4 GHz out of it. That said, the boost clock is based on power and temperature usage, so in reality I actually max out around 4.6 GHz, but still that's much better. I'll eventually get around to tweaking the CPU to get closer to the advertised 5 GHz. How do I achieve such speeds? Well, with liquid cooling, of course. The old PC had a Corsair Hydro H50 cooler, and the new PC has a Cooler Master Master Liquid ML240L RGB V2, which I actually installed the fans backwards on in the video, so I had to flip those around the next day. Besides the RGB lighting, which I personally could take or leave, the Corsair had a 120mm radiator, while the Cooler Master has a 240mm radiator, which should cool much better, but the 11700K also runs much hotter, so it's hard to do a comparison. In all honesty, the new cooler isn't as quiet as I'd like it to be, but in doing research, I don't think there are any better options on the market. The variable speed fans make it easier to notice other noises like the pump or a fan bearing, since the sound of rushing air isn't drowning them out. The RAM comparison is pretty straightforward. Both machines have the same amount of RAM, the new machine just has a newer model. I don't really care about RAM speeds, but I do care about RAM capacity, and the new PC maxes out at 128 GB of RAM, which I'm looking forward to, whereas the old PC maxed out at 32 GB. That's more than enough for the average gamer, but when you do a lot of ultra high definition video editing, more RAM is always better. As for the GPU, it's the same in both machines. I literally just moved the card from one case to another. That means that gaming performance is overall the same on both machines since the GPU is the limiting factor. However, the extra cores in the CPU allow me to use more parts of the GPU at once without a performance hit. For example, when I live stream on Twitch, I use the 3D rendering cores in the card to actually play the game, but I use the encoder cores of the card to actually stream the video. The extra CPU cores let me do both without any frame rate drops, since the CPU ultimately has to drive the GPU. The power supplies are very similar in both machines. The old machine had a Corsair CX750 80 Plus bronze PSU, while the new one has an EVGA SuperNova 750 GT 80 Plus gold PSU. Both supply 750 watts of power, but the SuperNova is fully modular, has an eco mode that turns the fan off when the power draw is low, and is way more efficient, which is great for both the environment and my electric bill. Finally, the primary storage has been upgraded from a tiny Samsung 850 EVO to a large and in charge Crucial P1. The EVO was basically only large enough to hold the operating system, which meant that the machine would boot fast, but all my games and videos had to be stored on mechanical hard drives that were agonizingly slow. The P1 is large enough to hold the operating system and all my games and all my active video projects, but I still have to move the video projects to a mechanical drive when I'm done for long-term storage. The P1 is also roughly 4 times faster than the EVO, but that isn't super noticeable most of the time. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.